They called him mad, dangerous, even evil. Friedrich Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher, he was a cultural earthquake, a man whose words were so provocative, so radically different from anything the world had heard, that they still echo uncomfortably in lecture halls, religious institutions, and governments today. God is dead. There are no facts, only interpretations. What does not kill me makes me stronger. These aren't just quotes, they are philosophical bombs, and they're not meant to comfort you, they're meant to wake you up. Nietzsche wasn't interested in making people feel good. He wanted to force people to see the world as it truly is, without illusions, without filters, without lies. This video isn't about watered-down philosophy. It's not going to give you feel-good aphorisms or surface-level self-help tricks. What you're about to explore are the very ideas that got Nietzsche cast out of the academic world, condemned by the church, and misinterpreted by history itself. Ideas that society doesn't want you to think about too deeply, because if you did, you might start questioning everything. You might stop obeying. You might stop conforming. You might start thinking for yourself. And in a world built on systems of control, whether religious, moral, political, or cultural, there's nothing more dangerous than someone who truly thinks for themselves. Nietzsche's work dismantles everything we're taught to accept without question. Morality? He said most of it was born out of weakness and resentment. Religion? A crutch for those too afraid to face the reality of life without a cosmic father figure. Truth? An illusion, useful perhaps, but ultimately subjective. He didn't offer solutions in the way people wanted. He offered challenges. He handed his readers a mirror, but it didn't flatter, it confronted, and that's what makes him so dangerous. He forces you to ask, what if the way I've been living, thinking, and believing is all based on fear? What if everything I thought was good is just a lie told to keep me tame? Friedrich Nietzsche was not an easy man to understand. His writing is poetic, often cryptic, and laced with metaphor. But beneath the complexity is a core of raw, unsettling truth. He looked around at modern life and saw decay. People worshipping comfort, equality, and conformity, while calling it progress. He believed that to truly live, to become powerful, to become you had to burn away those illusions. You had to become willing to walk alone, to suffer, to create your own values. He called it becoming who you are, a task most people will avoid their entire lives. This video will take you deep into Nietzsche's most controversial and forbidden ideas, truths that mainstream culture is too afraid to teach. We'll explore 7 of his most dangerous philosophies, breaking each one down in a way that's clear, direct, and brutally honest. Whether you've never read a word of Nietzsche, or you've wrestled with his work for years, this is your chance to see the side of him that most people never dare to confront. These are not ideas for the faint of heart. But if you're ready to question everything, morality, faith, identity, even existence itself, then keep watching. Because once you see the world through Nietzsche's eyes, there's no going back. Before Nietzsche came along, morality was seen as something sacred, stable, and universal. In the West, most people believed that there was a clear line between good and evil, and that line had been handed down from religion, especially Christianity. Being good meant being humble, obedient, selfless, modest. Being bad meant being proud, ambitious, rebellious, or selfish. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant had tried to give morality a rational foundation, something eternal and unshakable. According to this traditional view, moral rules applied to everyone, regardless of time or place. They were absolute. There was no room for negotiation. If the rule said don't lie, then lying was always wrong, no matter the situation. This kind of moral thinking had deep roots in religious commandments and was enforced not just by institutions like the church, but by the culture at large. Then Nietzsche came along and threw a grenade into the entire idea of morality. He didn't just question what we considered moral, he questioned why we even had morality in the first place. He asked, who benefits from these rules? Who created them? And what if morality itself was based on weakness, fear, and resentment, not strength, truth, or goodness? Nietzsche believed that the traditional morality most people followed wasn't noble or enlightened at all. It was a coping mechanism, a clever trick invented by the weak to hold back the strong. He called this slave morality. According to Nietzsche, there are two basic types of morality: master morality and slave morality. Master morality comes from those who are powerful, independent, and self-assured. These people, whether they're leaders, warriors, artists, or thinkers, don't ask for permission to live as they see fit. They create their own values. For them, good means strong, creative, courageous, self-reliant. Bad means weak, cowardly, or uninspired. In contrast, slave morality is born out of powerlessness. It's the worldview of those who feel oppressed, small, or incapable of changing their circumstances. Instead of celebrating strength and ambition, slave morality flips the script. It says that being humble, obedient, and self-sacrificing is good, while being powerful, proud, or successful is evil. But Nietzsche saw this not as virtue, but as resentment disguised as morality. In his book, On the Genealogy of Morality, Nietzsche describes how the weak, unable to compete with the strong, began to hate them in secret. But since they couldn't defeat them in reality, they did something more cunning. They changed the narrative. They moralized their weakness. They called their fear humility, their obedience goodness, their submission virtue, and they labeled the strong, those who didn't play by these rules, as cruel, sinful, or evil. Over time, this slave morality became the dominant moral system in society, reinforced by religion, education, and culture. It became so widespread that people forgot it was ever invented. They started to believe it was simply true. Nietzsche saw this as a dangerous illusion. He believed that this kind of morality didn't elevate humanity, it shackled it. It kept people small, bitter, and afraid of their own potential. Instead of pushing themselves to grow stronger, to become more independent, more creative, more honest, they were taught to suppress those instincts, to feel guilty for wanting more, to be ashamed of their desires, their ambitions, their strength. In Nietzsche's view, morality had become a tool of control, not a set of universal truths, but a strategy to keep powerful individuals in check, to flatten difference, and to enforce conformity. This is why Nietzsche's critique is so explosive. He wasn't just saying that some moral rules are outdated or inconsistent. He was saying that the whole system is corrupt from the roots up. That morality, what most people consider to be sacred, is actually a weapon used to manipulate human behavior and maintain social order. And once you start to see morality this way, it changes everything. It makes you ask, am I being good because I believe in it, or because I've been trained to obey? Are my values really mine, or are they someone else's idea of what I should be? The implications of this are massive. If morality is just a social construct, something invented by human beings to serve specific agendas, then it's not eternal, it's not absolute, it can change. It has changed many times throughout history, and more importantly, it means that individuals have the right, and perhaps even the duty, to question it, to go beyond good and evil, as Nietzsche said, to create their own values. This is where Nietzsche becomes truly dangerous to institutions, because a society full of people who create their own values is a society that's very hard to control. You can't manipulate them with guilt. You can't scare them into obedience. You can't shame them into submission. They've seen behind the curtain. This is also why Nietzsche is so often misunderstood. People accuse him of promoting chaos, selfishness, or even cruelty. But that's a shallow reading. Nietzsche wasn't saying do whatever you want or hurt others to get ahead. He was calling for honesty, for the courage to face life without comforting lies, for strength, not just physical strength, but moral and psychological independence. He wanted people to stop pretending, to stop hiding behind moral slogans and start living with integrity on their own terms. But society doesn't like people who live on their own terms. They're unpredictable. They ask too many questions. They break rules. They don't play nice. And that's why Nietzsche's ideas remain to this day deeply uncomfortable, because they force us to look at ourselves not as moral beings defined by some higher law, but as complex creatures with instincts, drives, and desires that don't always fit into neat little boxes labeled good or bad. Nietzsche challenges us to move past those boxes altogether. In a world where we're constantly told what's right and wrong by media, religion, politics, and even social trends, Nietzsche offers a radical alternative. Think for yourself. Don't inherit your values. Don't blindly follow moral rules just because everyone else does. Examine them, question them, break them if they no longer serve your growth. That's not moral relativism in the shallow sense. It's moral responsibility. The responsibility to live authentically, to build your own compass, and to reject the lies that keep you small. That's Nietzsche's war on morality, not a call for chaos, but a call for courage. The courage to stop obeying and to start becoming. When Nietzsche wrote the words "God is dead," it wasn't a victory cry. It wasn't a celebration of atheism or a smug rejection of faith. It was a warning, a declaration of something he believed had already happened, but that most people hadn't fully realized yet. In his book, The Gay Science, he tells the story of a madman who runs into the marketplace shouting that God is dead and that we have killed him. The crowd laughs at him. They don't understand. But Nietzsche's message wasn't meant to be funny. It was tragic. He was pointing out that in the modern age, belief in God, especially in the Christian God, was slowly eroding. Science, reason, and secular thinking had replaced the need for a divine authority in many people's lives. Yet, despite this, people were still living as if nothing had changed. They clung to the same moral values, the same cultural habits, the same worldview, but without the foundation that had once justified them. So when Nietzsche said God is dead, he wasn't just talking about religion. He was talking about the collapse of a whole system of meaning. For centuries, people looked to God for answers about right and wrong, purpose and destiny, life and death. Religion provided not only hope but structure. It gave society a shared story, a sense of moral direction, a feeling that life had ultimate meaning. But if God no longer holds that central place, if he's no longer the author of truth, then what's left? That's the terrifying question Nietzsche was asking. What happens to a civilization when the story that held it together is no longer believable? This is the part many people misunderstand. Nietzsche wasn't celebrating the death of God, he was mourning it. He saw it as a kind of spiritual catastrophe. He wrote that people had wiped away the entire horizon, that we were now adrift in a world without clear direction. Without God, there is no absolute truth, no divine justice, no cosmic reward or punishment, no guarantee that life has a purpose. And Nietzsche feared that most people weren't ready to face that reality. They would either fall into despair or worse, try to keep the old morality alive without realizing that its foundation was gone. He called this kind of thinking nihilism, the sense that nothing really matters anymore because there's no higher meaning behind anything. And Nietzsche didn't think nihilism was just a personal crisis, it was a cultural one. He believed it was going to infect everything: art, politics, education, morality. People would become disoriented, anxious, and hollow. They would chase distractions, wealth, comfort, entertainment, anything to avoid facing the truth. And in the vacuum left by religion, Nietzsche feared that people would turn to false idols, nationalism, ideology, mass movements. They would trade one blind faith for another. That's why Nietzsche wrote so urgently. He wasn't trying to destroy people's beliefs. He was trying to wake them up to the fact that those beliefs were already dying and that they needed to be replaced with something deeper, something stronger, something real. But why is this idea so suppressed? Why is it rarely discussed openly, especially in mainstream education or popular culture? Because it's threatening. Religion isn't just a personal belief system, it's a pillar of cultural stability. It provides a shared sense of identity. It tells people how to live, how to treat each other, how to find meaning in suffering. If that pillar is removed, it creates fear. Not just fear of eternal damnation, but fear of disorder, moral chaos, spiritual emptiness. Nietzsche understood that most people would rather cling to comforting illusions than confront the abyss of meaninglessness. And so institutions, religious, educational, even political, often avoid talking about Nietzsche, or they reduce him to a misunderstood madman, a nihilist, or a dangerous rebel. They paint him as someone who wanted to destroy everything, when in truth, he was trying to help rebuild something more honest. Nietzsche didn't believe that life without God had to be meaningless. In fact, he thought it could be more meaningful, but only if we had the courage to create that meaning ourselves. He wrote about the need to become who you are, to live as a creator of values rather than a follower of old ones. But this is a terrifying freedom. It means that there are no guarantees, no divine backup, no one to tell you if you're right or wrong. It puts the full weight of responsibility on your shoulders. And that's why Nietzsche is so feared, not because he took away God, but because he gave you no one to hide behind. His philosophy demands spiritual maturity. It asks you to grow up, not just emotionally or intellectually, but existentially. It demands that you look at the world without filters and still choose to live with purpose, to build meaning where none is given. This is the opposite of nihilism, but it's harder. It's a philosophy for those willing to face the void and still say yes to life. It's for those who are brave enough to create their own compass in a world where the old maps no longer work. Nietzsche's attack on religion wasn't meant to strip life of meaning. It was meant to strip away borrowed meaning, the kind handed down uncritically, the kind that keeps people obedient rather than free. He saw traditional religion as something that had become stale, rigid, lifeless, a system that once gave life structure but now only suffocated it. He wasn't against spirituality. He wasn't against awe or reverence or the search for higher truths. But he was against anything that discouraged people from thinking for themselves, from embracing their full power as creators, from becoming more than they are. In a sense, Nietzsche was calling for a new kind of spirituality, one not built on fear or obedience, but on strength, self-honesty, and personal transformation. But that's dangerous to institutions built on conformity. It's dangerous to power structures that rely on mass belief. That's why Nietzsche is rarely taught in full, why his most profound insights are ignored, misquoted, or stripped of their deeper meaning. Because if people truly understood what he was saying, they might start asking questions no one wants to answer. The death of God, in Nietzsche's eyes, was not the end of philosophy. It was the beginning. It was a doorway into a new kind of life, one where meaning isn't handed to you. You must forge it with your own hands. But that's not a path for everyone. It requires strength, clarity, and above all, courage. Nietzsche believed most people would turn away from that challenge. They would retreat into dogma, distractions, or despair. But for those who don't, those willing to confront the terrifying freedom of a world without God, Nietzsche's philosophy becomes a guide, not to destruction, but to rebirth, not to emptiness, but to authenticity. That is the real meaning behind God is dead. Not a slogan, not a joke, a mirror. And when you look into it, The question isn't just what you believe, it's whether you're ready to live without illusions, whether you're ready to become the author of your own life. One of the most misunderstood and misused concepts in all of Nietzsche's philosophy is the idea of the will to power. Many people assume, often without ever reading Nietzsche, that this idea is about domination, about crushing others to get ahead, about using violence, cruelty, or force to impose your will on the world. And in part, that misconception isn't entirely their fault. Nietzsche's writing is intense, poetic, and sometimes cryptic. He didn't always define his terms clearly, and he often used metaphor and irony in ways that confused even his closest readers. But the biggest reason people misunderstand the will to power is because others have distorted it intentionally. Especially in the 20th century, this idea was twisted beyond recognition by people who wanted to use Nietzsche's name and reputation to justify horrific acts of control and violence. Let's start by understanding what Nietzsche actually meant. At its core, the will to power is not about hurting others. It's not about politics, war, or fascist conquest. It's about life itself. Nietzsche believed that everything in existence, every organism, every person, every system, is driven not just by survival, not just by reproduction, but by a deeper, more essential force, the desire to grow, to expand, to assert, to express, to become. That force is what he called the will to power. It's the inner drive behind all creativity, all ambitions, all transformation. It's what pushes a tree to grow through concrete. It's what drives a child to speak, a thinker to question, a dreamer to act. It's not necessarily violent, it's vital. It's not about destruction, it's about expression. It's not about power over others, it's about power over yourself. This idea was Nietzsche's alternative to other dominant theories of life. At the time, many philosophers and scientists were heavily influenced by Darwinism, the idea that life is just a struggle to survive. Nietzsche disagreed. He thought survival was just the beginning. Living creatures don't just want to exist, they want to flourish, to become more, to shape the world around them. That's the will to power. And in human beings, this will manifest not only in physical ways, but in psychological and creative ones. It shows up in the desire to grow beyond our limits, to overcome fear, to reject mediocrity, to create values that reflect who we truly are. It's the driving force behind every act of greatness, not because it seeks applause or status, but because it must express itself, just like a flame has to burn. Where people go wrong is when they interpret this idea as permission to dominate others. Nietzsche never said that. In fact, he warned against the kind of people who seek power only to control others. To Nietzsche, true power was internal. The highest expression of the will to power wasn't found in violence or tyranny, it was found in self-overcoming. That means confronting your own weaknesses, fears, lies, and limitations and rising above them. It means not settling for who you've been told to be. It means choosing to evolve rather than stay comfortable. Nietzsche admired individuals who were able to harness this inner force to create, to transform, to live authentically. He wasn't interested in bullies. He was interested in creators, people who could shape their own destiny. But why is this idea so feared by society? Because a person who fully embraces the will to power is difficult to control. They don't obey blindly. They don't conform for approval. They don't apologize for being different. They live with intensity, purpose, and independence. And in a world that often rewards obedience and punishes deviation, such people are seen as threats. Systems, whether political, religious, or cultural, tend to work best when people follow the rules, stay in line, and don't ask too many questions. But someone who lives from their inner strength, who questions everything, who refuses to be boxed in by external labels, that person can't be managed. And that's exactly what Nietzsche wanted to awaken in people. The courage to break free from roles, to stop pretending, to start becoming. Of course, this powerful idea didn't sit well with everyone. In the early 20th century, Nietzsche's writings were picked up and horribly distorted by the Nazi regime in Germany. They took the concept of the will to power and twisted it into a justification for militarism, racial supremacy, and totalitarian control. They even tried to portray Nietzsche as a prophet of the Aryan master race, which is not only false, but goes against everything Nietzsche actually believed. He despised nationalism, he hated anti-Semitism, and he warned constantly against blind groupthink and mob mentality, two things the Nazis completely embodied. But unfortunately, Nietzsche wasn't around to defend himself. He died long before the Nazis rose to power. His sister, who was deeply involved with nationalist ideology, edited and manipulated his unpublished notes to fit their agenda. She essentially hijacked his legacy to support a cause he would have found repulsive. That's part of why Nietzsche's name became so controversial for much of the 20th century. He was wrongly seen as a philosopher of cruelty, elitism, or even fascism. But if you actually read his work, not just cherry-picked quotes but full texts, it becomes clear that Nietzsche wasn't advocating for tyranny. He was calling for liberation. Liberation from false morals, from inherited beliefs, from herd mentalities, from internal weakness. His philosophy was never about conquest of others, it was about conquest of the self. The will to power is a dangerous idea, not because it leads people to harm others, but because it demands that they confront themselves honestly. It strips away excuses. It exposes the games we play to stay small and safe. It asks, are you living the life you were told to live, or the life you want to live? Are you repeating what others taught you, or are you creating something new? Are you following the script, or writing your own? To embrace the will to power is to commit to a life of constant becoming. It means accepting discomfort as part of growth. It means seeking challenge rather than comfort, depth rather than distraction. And most of all, it means refusing to let fear or guilt dictate who you are. This is why Nietzsche admired artists, rebels, and independent thinkers, people who dared to express their full selves, even when the world pushed back. Because that's where real power lives, not in domination, but in creation, not in conformity, but in authenticity. And that is why society will always be wary of this idea, because a person who lives by the will to power cannot be tamed. They don't just survive, they thrive. They don't follow, they lead, even if no one else comes with them. They are not dependent on systems of approval, praise, or validation. They are self-directed, self-governing, and self-created. And in a world that profits from your insecurity, your obedience, and your fear, that kind of person is revolutionary. So when Nietzsche speaks of the will to power, he's not handing you a weapon to use against the world. He's handing you a challenge to become who you are, fully and unapologetically, to rise above inherited values and small ambitions, to find your own voice, your own path, your own fire, and follow it no matter what. That kind of strength terrifies people who live by imitation, but for those who are ready to live by truth, the will to power is not dangerous, it's the beginning of freedom. When Nietzsche wrote Beyond Good and Evil, he wasn't just trying to shock people with bold claims, he was trying to tear down an illusion that had controlled human behavior for centuries. The illusion that good and evil are fixed, eternal truths. Most of us grow up thinking that right and wrong are black and white, that moral rules are universal, that what's considered good today has always been good and always will be. But Nietzsche disagreed. He believed that these ideas, what we call morality, are not objective truths handed down from the universe or a divine being. Instead, They are human inventions, shaped by culture, power, fear, and historical context. To him, what people call good or evil often says more about their personal values, social roles, or hidden resentments than about any real, universal truth. Nietzsche argued that there is no single timeless definition of good or evil. These concepts change over time from place to place and even from person to person. What one society calls evil, another might celebrate as virtuous. Take strength, for example. In ancient warrior cultures like Sparta or among Roman nobility, power, pride, and dominance were seen as noble traits. To be strong and victorious wasn't just acceptable, it was honorable. But in more modern religious cultures, those same traits are condemned as sinful or arrogant. Instead, humility, submission, and meekness are lifted up as moral ideals. Nietzsche saw this shift not as progress, but as a kind of moral reversal, a change driven by resentment, fear, and weakness rather than enlightenment. That's why Nietzsche was so obsessed with uncovering the origins of our moral beliefs. He didn't just want to know what people believed, he wanted to know why they believed it. He wanted to dig underneath the surface and ask, who created these values? Whose interests do they serve? Are they helping us grow stronger and freer, or are they keeping us tame and obedient? For Nietzsche, most of what we call morality wasn't created by noble, free-spirited individuals, but by the weak, by those who couldn't win through strength or creativity, and so turned to guilt, shame, and fear to bring others down to their level. This ties back to the slave morality idea, but here it takes on a broader meaning. Morality itself becomes a tool, not a compass toward truth, but a weapon to maintain power structures and suppress individual potential. This idea is radical because it doesn't just challenge personal beliefs. It threatens every authority that uses morality to justify itself. Governments rely on the belief that their laws reflect moral truths. Religions claim to possess divine guidance about good and evil. Schools, political parties, even social movements, many of them base their legitimacy on the idea that they are morally right. But if Nietzsche is correct, if good and evil are not absolute but subjective, then all these claims begin to fall apart. Their authority becomes fragile, their laws become preferences, their truths become opinions, and for institutions that depend on obedience and belief, that's terrifying. Think about how often morality has shifted throughout history. At one time, slavery was not only legal, it was considered morally acceptable in many cultures. Women were denied education and political rights not out of cruelty, people claimed, but because it was proper and natural. Burning heretics, waging holy wars, persecuting scientists, these were all done with moral justification. What changed? Not some universal truth suddenly appearing, but the people, the culture, the power dynamics. Morality evolved, which means it was never absolute to begin with. Nietzsche saw this clearly, and he warned that anyone who believes in fixed moral truths is either naive or being manipulated. But if morality is subjective, doesn't that lead to chaos? Doesn't it mean people can just do whatever they want with no consequences? That's the fear most people have, and that's why Nietzsche's philosophy is often seen as dangerous. But Nietzsche wasn't promoting lawlessness or selfishness. He wasn't saying, there's no such thing as good or bad, so hurt others if it benefits you. He was saying something much deeper. True morality has to come from within. It has to be created, not copied. It has to be earned, not inherited. That's much harder. It means taking full responsibility for your choices without hiding behind a rule book. It means acting with integrity, not because a priest or a politician tells you to, but because it's consistent with who you've chosen to become. This is where Nietzsche's concept links directly to his criticism of the herd mentality. Most people, he said, don't really think for themselves. They adopt the values of their culture, their family, their religion, without ever questioning them. They follow the crowd, they conform, they believe what's popular, not what's true. Nietzsche called these people the herd, not because they're evil, but because they're passive. They fear standing out, they fear responsibility, they would rather be safe than free. and Nietzsche had no patience for that. He believed the herd mentality was one of the greatest threats to human potential, because when everyone thinks the same way, when everyone obeys the same shallow moral code, there's no room for greatness, no room for new ideas, or for people to rise above the norm. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche wasn't trying to destroy morality altogether. He was trying to destroy lazy morality, the kind of morality that is blindly accepted, never examined, and used to shame or control others. He believed that the future of humanity depended on a new kind of individual, someone who had the strength to go beyond the inherited ideas of good and evil, and to create their own values. Someone who could look at the chaos of life, the complexity, the uncertainty, and still say, I will choose what matters, I will live by what I believe, not by what I'm told. That is what Nietzsche called the free spirit. Not someone without ethics, but someone whose ethics come from conscious creation, not unconscious imitation. Of course, this idea is deeply unsettling to those in power. A society built on conformity cannot function if too many people start thinking for themselves. If people begin to see that morality is fluid and contextual, then laws, traditions, and hierarchies lose their divine aura. They're exposed as human creations, changeable, fallible, often self-serving. That's why Nietzsche's work is still feared today. Not because it's morally corrupt, but because it's morally liberating. It tells you that you don't have to accept the labels given to you, that you can reject the story society tells you and write your own. But it also warns you that this freedom comes with a cost, the responsibility to live deliberately, to judge with care, and to bear the burden of creating your own meaning. So when Nietzsche speaks of going beyond good and evil, he's not pushing for anarchy, he's pushing for authenticity. He's challenging you to examine every belief you hold and ask, is this truly mine? Or did I inherit it without thinking? He's inviting you to stop being part of the herd and start being an individual. Not in a shallow, rebellious way, but in a deep, existential way. And that is far more dangerous to the world than any act of violence, because one free individual can challenge an entire system just by refusing to play by its rules. Nietzsche's destruction of the illusion of universal truths isn't meant to leave you hopeless. It's meant to wake you up, to shake you free from the dream that morality is settled, easy and permanent. It's not. It's a battle, a creative, painful, necessary battle, to live with integrity in a world that often punishes those who don't conform. But for Nietzsche, that battle is worth it, because only by going beyond good and evil can you become something greater than just a product of your environment. You can become yourself. Among Nietzsche's most profound and perhaps most misunderstood ideas is the concept of amor fati, which translates from Latin as love of fate. But this isn't some poetic phrase or passive acceptance of whatever life throws at you. It's a radical mindset, a total transformation of how we view suffering, tragedy, and the painful parts of life. Amor fati is the act of not just enduring your fate, but loving it, embracing every moment, every hardship, every failure, as if you had chosen it yourself. Nietzsche didn't want us to merely tolerate suffering. He wanted us to affirm it, to say yes to life not just when it's easy and pleasurable, but when it's brutal, unfair, and heartbreaking. This is not an easy philosophy to live by, and that's exactly why it's so powerful. In a world obsessed with comfort, optimization, and positivity, the idea of embracing pain sounds almost offensive. We're told to avoid suffering at all costs. Take the pill, buy the product, follow the morning routine, chase happiness like it's a prize you can win. Every self-help book, motivational speech, and Instagram quote seems to promise the same thing. less pain, more pleasure. So when Nietzsche comes along and says, don't just accept your suffering, love it, it feels wrong, dangerous even. But Nietzsche wasn't saying we should seek out misery for its own sake. He was saying that if pain is unavoidable, and it is, then your only real choice is how you respond to it. Will you curse your life and grow bitter? Or will you find the strength to transform your suffering into something meaningful? That's what makes Amor Fati so controversial. It challenges the modern idea that a good life is a painless one. It asks you to give up the illusion of control, the belief that if you just try hard enough, you can avoid all hardship. Amor Fati doesn't pretend that suffering is noble or romantic. It simply demands that you stop running from it. Because once you stop resisting your fate, you stop being its victim, you become its master, and this is the ultimate reversal. Instead of life pushing you around, you absorb everything it throws at you and make it part of your power. Like fire-consuming fuel, Amor Fati turns every obstacle into energy. Every disappointment becomes a teacher. Every loss becomes part of your story, not a scar, but a symbol of resilience. To live with Amor Fati means to live without resentment. That's not the same as being numb or emotionless. It means refusing to waste your life wishing things were different. Think of a failure that still haunts you. A relationship that ended painfully. A dream that collapsed. Amor Fati doesn't say, that didn't matter. It says, that mattered, and I embrace it anyway. It happened. It shaped you. You don't have to be grateful for the pain itself, but you can be grateful for the strength it gave you, the clarity it forced upon you, the fire it lit inside you. Nietzsche believed that suffering was essential to growth, and that true greatness was impossible without it. He didn't want to eliminate suffering, he wanted to redeem it. Now imagine applying Amor Fati in your everyday life. You wake up late and miss an important meeting. Instead of spiraling into self-hate, you treat it as a lesson in humility and preparation. You lose a job, not just as a setback, but as a redirection, a chance to rethink what you truly want. You go through heartbreak, but instead of drowning in anger or blame, you absorb the pain and let it make you wiser, softer, deeper. Amor Fati turns you into an alchemist, someone who takes pain and turns it into purpose. It doesn't erase suffering, but it changes its meaning. And meaning is everything. This way of thinking is rare. It goes against almost every message you receive from modern society. Companies don't want you to love your fate. They want you to feel like something's missing, so you keep buying. Therapists, self-help influencers, and lifestyle gurus often promise relief from suffering, not tools to live with it. Even religion sometimes turns suffering into a transaction, something to be endured now for a reward later. But Nietzsche's Amor Fati is different. It doesn't offer rewards, it doesn't promise peace. It offers something more real, the ability to stand in the middle of a storm and still say yes to life. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. And this is why society doesn't promote Amor Fati. It's too demanding. It puts the burden back on the individual. It says there are no excuses, no easy exits. You don't get to blame fate or parents or the system, not if you're serious about growth. Amor Fati terrifies people because it removes all illusions of control and comfort. It demands radical acceptance, not passive surrender, but an active, fierce embrace of reality, however ugly it may be. That kind of acceptance isn't common. It's rare. It requires strength, not just emotional strength, but existential strength. The ability to live in a world that doesn't care about your plans and still keep going. Nietzsche once wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity." This isn't just about putting a positive spin on things. It's about developing the inner muscle to face life in its raw, unfiltered form, and to not just survive, but to affirm it. This is where Nietzsche's thinking intersects with the lives of people we admire most. The artists who suffer and still create, the leaders who fail and still rise, the survivors who've seen the worst and still love life. Whether they call it amor fati or not, they live it. So what would it look like if you adopted amor fati? It would mean ending the war against your past. No more regrets that rot you from the inside. It would mean stopping the chase for the perfect future. No more needing life to be a certain way before you allow yourself to be at peace. It would mean looking at every twist in your story and saying, I accept this, I own this, I use this. It's not about being happy all the time. It's about being unbreakable. Not in the sense that nothing touches you, but in the sense that nothing destroys your spirit. You bend, you bleed, you keep walking. And in that, amor fati becomes more than a mindset. It becomes a way of life, a rebellion against victimhood, a refusal to see yourself as cursed. It's not something you achieve overnight. It's something you practice, especially in the moments when it's hardest. When you're broke, alone, rejected, afraid, that's when amor fati is most needed. It reminds you that you are not powerless, that fate isn't your enemy, that everything you face, no matter how unfair, is raw material for becoming who you're meant to be. Nietzsche knew this idea wouldn't be popular. He knew most people would prefer false comfort to painful truth. But he also believed that the greatest among us, the ones who don't just live but create, are the ones who stop asking why me and start asking what now. The ones who treat suffering not as something to be avoided, but as something to be transformed. That's amor fati, not a passive life but a powerful one, not the end of struggle but the beginning of strength, not the denial of pain but the embrace of its purpose. And once you see the world this way, you start to realize, maybe fate isn't the enemy, maybe it's the furnace, and maybe you, just like Nietzsche hoped, were born to walk through fire. Few of Nietzsche's ideas have been as misunderstood, misused, or misrepresented as the concept of the Übermensch, often translated as the Superman or Overman. At first glance, the word itself can feel intimidating or elitist. It conjures up images of dominance, superiority, and a kind of cold, emotionless ideal of perfection. Worse, in the 20th century, the term was completely hijacked and twisted by fascist regimes, particularly the Nazis, who used it to support racist, nationalist ideologies that Nietzsche himself would have found revolting. But Nietzsche's original vision of the Übermensch was nothing like this. It had nothing to do with race, cruelty, or ruling over others. In fact, it was a deeply personal, spiritual, and psychological idea. It was Nietzsche's answer to the question, how do we live meaningfully in a world without God, without absolute truths, and without external guidance? To understand the Übermensch, you have to go back to Nietzsche's fundamental belief that we are living in a world where traditional values have collapsed. God is dead, as he famously said. The old systems that once told us what to do, what to believe, and how to live are no longer credible, not because we don't need meaning, but because those systems no longer match the complexity of modern life. So what happens when the old values die? Do we fall into despair, nihilism, and apathy? That was the danger Nietzsche saw, but he also saw a way out, a path forward. That path was the Übermensch. The Übermensch is not a physical being, it's not a biological upgrade or a comic book superhero. It's an ideal, a future version of humanity that creates its own values, lives with courage, and refuses to be defined by the limitations of society, religion, or herd thinking. The Übermensch is someone who doesn't follow moral rules simply because they were taught to. Instead, they go beyond inherited systems and build something new from within. They are radically authentic. They are not afraid to be alone. They don't seek approval. They are self-created. Where most people look outside themselves for meaning, the Übermensch looks inward and says, I will decide what matters. This is why the Übermensch is often misunderstood, because it doesn't offer easy answers. It requires intense self-reflection and courage. People often assume Nietzsche was saying some people are better than others by birth, that the Übermensch is about being above other people. But Nietzsche's point wasn't about social hierarchy, it was about personal evolution. He wasn't saying some are born Übermensch, he was saying you have to become one. It's a lifelong process of self-overcoming, where you confront your fears, your conditioning, your weaknesses, and move through them, not by pretending they don't exist, but by using them to grow. Now think about why this idea is so threatening to society. The Übermensch doesn't conform, they don't need validation, they don't fit neatly into categories or obey institutions, and that's exactly what most systems of power fear. Governments, corporations, religions, all of them rely on mass behavior. They need people to follow the rules, buy the products, stay in line, and not ask too many questions. But the Übermensch asks all the questions. They tear down what's fake. They refuse to play roles that aren't true to them. And because of this, they are seen as dangerous, unpredictable, even subversive. Society functions best when people agree on the same values. It thrives on collective myths: money, status, tradition, morality, identity. But the Übermensch threatens to break those myths. Not recklessly, but honestly. They look at the world and say, these values no longer serve me, so I will make my own. That kind of spiritual independence is rare, and it's uncomfortable for those who have invested everything in stability and sameness. And so, throughout history, the Übermensch has been ignored, attacked, or twisted into something unrecognizable. This brings us to one of the darkest chapters in Nietzsche's legacy, the Nazi distortion of the Übermensch. During the rise of Hitler's regime, Nietzsche's works were selectively edited and manipulated, especially by his sister, Elisabeth Foster Nietzsche, who was a supporter of fascist ideology. She removed context, reinterpreted his metaphors, and rebranded the Übermensch as a symbol of racial superiority and German nationalism. Nothing could be further from Nietzsche's original meaning. He despised nationalism. He was openly critical of anti-Semitism. He believed the state was a dangerous form of control, and that herd thinking, whether religious or political, was poison to the individual spirit. The Nazi Übermensch was about domination of others. Nietzsche's Übermensch was about mastery of self. Unfortunately, these distortions stuck. For decades, Nietzsche's name was associated with fascism and elitism. People who had never read a page of his work dismissed him as toxic or extremist. But the truth is, Nietzsche's Übermensch is a deeply human ideal. It doesn't require genius or perfection, it requires courage. The courage to step outside your comfort zone. The courage to unlearn what you've been taught. The courage to become something new. And that's not something you're born into, it's something you build, brick by brick, choice by choice. You can see glimpses of the Übermensch in many of history's most transformative figures, not because they called themselves that, but because they lived with that same inner fire. People who broke free from convention, created something new, and inspired others to rise above limitations. Living like the Übermensch doesn't mean rejecting all values. It means choosing your values consciously, living by them authentically, and being willing to pay the price of that freedom. It means facing the pain of loneliness, the burden of choice, the weight of responsibility, and walking through it anyway, because the reward is real freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, but the freedom to live without lies. To become someone who doesn't need applause, who doesn't need to fit in, who doesn't need to be told who they are, because they've already decided. This is why Nietzsche described the Übermensch as the meaning of the earth. He wasn't pointing to heaven, or to an afterlife, or to some divine order. He was pointing here, this life, this body, this moment. He wanted us to stop chasing escape and start embracing transformation. The Übermensch doesn't transcend life. They affirm it, fully, fiercely, no matter how messy, complicated, or painful it gets. So when you hear people talk about Nietzsche's Übermensch as some cold, inhuman ideal, or worse, as a symbol of oppression, remember this: Nietzsche's Übermensch is the opposite of that. It's not about being above others. It's about being beyond lies, beyond fear, beyond imitation. It's about becoming so deeply yourself that the world can no longer seduce you with comfort or scare you into silence. In a time where everyone is chasing external validation, where identity is packaged and sold, and where conformity is often rewarded more than courage, the idea of the Übermensch is more relevant than ever. It calls us to rise not above others but above ourselves, to outgrow who we were yesterday, to refuse to live a second-hand life, to become, as Nietzsche might say, the author of our own existence. And that, more than any political system, religious belief, or cultural trend, is what truly scares the world. A human being who no longer needs to be told what to believe, who to be, or how to live, is a human being who cannot be controlled, and that, Nietzsche believed, is the future we must all dare to create. Of all Nietzsche's ideas, eternal recurrence might be the most haunting, the most difficult to digest, and the most spiritually intense. It's not a scientific theory or a mystical prophecy. It's a thought experiment, a challenge that strikes directly at the core of how we live our lives. Nietzsche asks you to imagine this. What if every single moment of your life, every joy, every pain, every small decision, every heartbreak, every embarrassment, every success, and every failure had to be lived over and over again for eternity, not once more, but endlessly? Not as a metaphor, but as literal reality. You wouldn't just be reborn to live again in a general sense. You would relive your exact life in perfect detail, without change, on an eternal loop. Would you welcome that thought, or would it crush you? This is eternal recurrence, the idea that time is not linear, but circular, that your life, just as it is, would be repeated forever. Nietzsche introduces this concept in The Gay Science and develops it further in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's not meant to be taken as a literal prediction about the structure of the universe, although some have tried to argue it that way, but rather as a powerful philosophical test. Nietzsche doesn't ask whether it's true. He asks, what would it mean for your life if it were true? Would you live differently? Would you still make the same choices? Would you still waste time on regrets, on bitterness, on fear? Or would you rise to the occasion and start living as if every single moment mattered infinitely? At first glance, the idea is terrifying. The thought of reliving your worst moments forever is unbearable for most people. Think about the mistakes you've made, the people you've hurt, the times you were too afraid to act. Now imagine doing it all again, and again, forever. It's a nightmare if you've lived a life filled with regret or avoidance. And that's precisely Nietzsche's point. If the idea of eternal recurrence horrifies you, then maybe you're not living the life you actually want to live. Maybe you've been coasting, numbing yourself, hiding from your potential. Nietzsche believed that the purpose of this thought experiment was to shock you into clarity, to wake you up from the trance of habit and ask, am I living a life worth repeating? But here's the twist. Eternal recurrence isn't just a source of dread, it can also be a source of incredible power. Because if you can say yes to that eternal return, not just to your best days, but to your worst, then you've achieved something profound. You've embraced life fully. You've stopped wishing things were different. You've stopped trying to escape. You've learned how to live with such honesty, such intensity, such presence, that even your suffering has value. You've accepted your life not as a series of accidents, but as something you own completely. That kind of affirmation, That deep, unconditional yes to existence is what Nietzsche called the highest form of strength. And that's the beauty of eternal recurrence. It's not about perfection. It's not about making every moment pleasurable. It's about living every moment deliberately. It's about being so alive, so connected to your choices and your path, that you would be willing to relive it all. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. Because you acted from your own truth. Because you didn't run. Because you faced it all and still said, "This is mine, I claim it." Practically speaking, eternal recurrence is a tool for radical self-responsibility. It forces you to think long-term, not just in years, but in eternity. Before making a decision, you can ask yourself, if I had to do this forever, would I still choose it? That doesn't mean every moment must be perfect or joyful, but it does mean you should treat every moment as significant. Every conversation, every habit, every relationship suddenly becomes weighty, meaningful. You stop living like time is disposable. You start paying attention. You start aligning your actions with your deepest values, because anything less would be hell to repeat forever. Now think about how this mindset stands in total opposition to the way most people live. In modern society, we're constantly encouraged to escape. We binge watch, we scroll endlessly, we medicate our boredom and numb our anxiety. We live for the weekend, we wait for vacations, we dream of the future and avoid the present. Time is something we kill, not something we treasure. People say things like, "I can't wait for this day to be over," or "let's just get through this year." But Nietzsche's eternal recurrence obliterates that kind of thinking. Because in his world, there is no escape, no fast forward, no redo. You either live with intention or you suffer the consequences again and again. This is also why eternal recurrence is such a controversial idea. It's too intense for most people. It demands too much. It's easier to believe in a life with second chances, in an afterlife that wipes the slate clean, or in some cosmic justice that will make things right. Eternal recurrence offers no such comfort. It says, this is it, this moment, right now, forever. And that's terrifying to anyone who's not living in alignment with their truth. It's terrifying to those who feel trapped, unfulfilled, or lost, because it confronts them with the urgency to change. Society doesn't want you to think this way. It wants you to be distracted, compliant, endlessly consuming. It doesn't want you to ask big, terrifying questions about how you spend your time, who you are, or what you truly want. Eternal recurrence is dangerous because it wakes people up. It strips away the excuses. It puts the mirror in your face and asks, can you face yourself forever? And if the answer is no, then you know what needs to change. That's the real gift of this idea, not to punish you, but to liberate you. Because once you stop taking time for granted, you start living. Nietzsche knew this idea wouldn't be for everyone. In fact, he believed most people would reject it. They would label it absurd or depressing. But he also believed that the strongest souls, the ones brave enough to confront the weight of existence, would be transformed by it. They wouldn't be crushed by the thought of living their lives over and over. They would be inspired to make those lives worth repeating. And in doing so, they would rise above mediocrity, above fear, above regret. They would become creators of meaning, architects of value, and masters of time, not because they controlled the future, but because they honored the present. So what does eternal recurrence mean for you? It means stop waiting for your life to begin. Stop postponing your dreams, your honesty, your transformation. If you wouldn't be willing to live today 1,000 times over, then maybe it's time to change how you're living. Nietzsche isn't judging you, he's daring you to live so deeply and fully that even your pain becomes sacred, daring you to say yes to everything you are, daring you to become the kind of person who wouldn't fear eternity, but would welcome it, because every moment was real. That's the ultimate test. Not how much pleasure you've had, not how much you've achieved, but whether you've lived in such a way that you could relive it all forever and still say, yes, again. Eternal recurrence is not just a thought, it's a mirror, and what you see in it is entirely up to you. Now that we've walked through the storm of Nietzsche's most controversial and dangerous ideas, let's take a moment to stand still and reflect on everything we've just uncovered. These aren't just abstract philosophical concepts. They're deeply personal, deeply challenging, and, if you truly engage with them, profoundly transformative. We began with Nietzsche's War on Morality, where he tore apart the illusion that there is some universal, eternal good that applies to everyone equally. He exposed how most morality is born from fear, weakness, and resentment, not strength or truth, and challenged us to look deeper than surface-level definitions of right and wrong. Then we faced the existential earthquake of God is dead, not a celebration, but a mourning. Nietzsche wasn't attacking faith for fun. He was observing a world losing its religious anchor and asking, what will we do now, in a world where the old gods have stopped speaking? His answer wasn't comfort, it was responsibility. Without divine order, we are the ones who must shape meaning. In The Will to Power, we explored what drives life at its core, not just the will to survive, but the will to express, to grow, to overcome. Misused by history, misunderstood by many, this idea is not about conquest of others. It's about the ongoing conquest of self. The strength to rise again and again, not in violence, but in vision. Then came Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche's demand that we see moral values not as sacred commandments, but as human inventions, flexible, historical, and often political. This shakes the foundation of every institution that tells us how to live. And that's why it's feared, because once people start creating their own values, they can't be controlled by the old ones. With Amor Fati, we turned towards suffering and met it not with resistance, but with a radical embrace. Nietzsche dared us to not just endure our fate, but to love it, to say yes to the pain, the struggle, the imperfection of life, because only by affirming our hardships can we transform them into something meaningful. We then met the Übermensch, not as a tyrant or superior being, but as an ideal of what we could become if we stopped living second-hand lives. The Übermensch is someone who creates their own values, lives authentically, and rises above the herd, not to dominate others, but to fully embody their truth. And finally, we looked into the mirror of eternal recurrence, the idea that you must live as if your life would repeat forever. A terrifying thought for those who drift passively through life, but a powerful challenge for those ready to take control, to live deliberately, to say yes to every moment with complete presence. Put together, these 7 ideas form a philosophy that terrifies institutions, unsettles traditions, and defies easy answers. Why? Because Nietzsche's work is a threat to anything built on blind obedience. It doesn't fit within religious doctrine. It doesn't serve political ideologies. It doesn't promote conformity. It does the opposite. It demands that you think for yourself, that you take full responsibility for your values, your choices, your fate. That's why society often dismisses Nietzsche as dangerous, extreme, or incomprehensible. Not because his ideas are wrong, but because they are uncomfortable. They ask you to abandon illusions, they strip away the safety nets, they offer no promises of salvation, only the raw power of self-transformation. But in that discomfort lies Nietzsche's true gift. If you're willing to wrestle with his ideas, to confront the fear, the doubt, the chaos, what you find on the other side is freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to become who you truly are. So I leave you with a question, not just to ponder, but to live. If you had to live your exact life over and over forever, would you? If not, what needs to change? What illusions do you still cling to? What values are truly yours? Nietzsche doesn't give you answers. He gives you the tools to find them yourself. He doesn't want followers. He wants individuals. He doesn't want you to believe. He wants you to become. So take these ideas not as gospel, but as provocations. Let them challenge you. Let them guide you deeper into yourself. Because once you understand Nietzsche, not just with your mind, but with your life, you don't just think differently, you live differently. And that's the most dangerous thing of all.